Good evening and Shavua Tov. Hope all of you are doing well and had a beautiful Shabbos. Tonight we're going to be learning Maseches Pesachim Daf Samach Beis, and Emir Tashem will get to the bottom of Samach Beis Amud Beis, just this one blot, and we'll catch up on the rest on both Sunday night, Emir Tashem, and Monday night. We'll even out within the next couple of days. It just wasn't able to prepare much more, so vacation schedules can be tough. It's been about 17 years since my grandfather, Abe Rice, passed away. I have a child named after him. My son Yaakov is Yaakov Abraham. And I wanted to dedicate tonight's learning in memory of my Zaidi, Abram Ben Yitzchak. He grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and lived out the rest of his life here in Chicago in my parents' house. The truth is that it was as a child, not as a grandchild, but as a child of my parents. It was watching models of Kibbud Av V'Em. A remarkably powerful episode of my childhood were those many years of the silent support that my parents gave to my Zaidi. And of course, we miss him and think about him regularly and fondly recall some of his Pesach antics and phrases and tunes and tones, and it was really a special time. Just wanted to dedicate our learning tonight in his memory. Yiratzon his neshama should have Maria. We're going to get started on the bottom of Daf Samach Aleph Amud Beis, about 6 lines from the bottom. But in order to have a little bit of context, we actually need to look at the very top line of Samach Aleph Amud Beis, and then we'll come right back down to the bottom. The case that we will be discussing for tonight is the case that reads at the top as follows: if a person does the Korban Pesach for the sake of Mila. So when it comes to the first of the 4 avodos of Hakrava, when it comes to the actual Shchita, the kavana of the shochet was for nimolin, those who had a bris milah, they were gemalt. However, when it came to the zrika, he was thinking about the arelim. He was thinking about someone who still had an orla and was therefore ineligible for the korban pesach. In light of that, there was a machlokes as to what the status was of the korban. And if you read on the second line of Samach Aleph Amud Beis, we saw Rav Chizda Amar Pasol and Rabba Amar Kasher, and what was the reason why they had this machlokes? The next line of Chizda Amar Pasol, Yesh machsheves arelim zrika, Rabba Amar Kasher ein machsheves arelim zrika. The question was, when there's a machshava in that last phase, in the 4th avoda of hakrava, of zrika, the actual zrikas hadam, so how does that impact the quality of the korban? That was subject to the machlokes there. So what we're going to do now is ask a question on that from the bottom and reject this answer altogether and just pivot into an entirely different direction. So the Gemara says 6 lines from the bottom on Samach Aleph Amud Beis, asking a question on this whole mahalach. We learned the whole brisa, and we're going to question from that brisa the Gemara's willingness to accept this recommendation that we're only talking about the mindset of Zrika. So it says the Gemara as follows: 6 lines from the bottom, Samach Aleph Amud Beis. Maskif Rav Ashi, Mimai dahai b'chol orel kula mashma. How do you know that in the brisa that we just learned, it quoted this pasuk of the chol orel? How do you know that that's talking about kula mashma? That the only psul is when the korban's only brought for arelim kula mashma. There's no people who are nimol. When the shochet is thinking about how to bring the korban pesach, he's not thinking about anyone other than people who are arelim. How do you know that that's pshat? Dil mahai b'chol orel mashma kol dehu orla. Maybe it means to exclude anyone, even if there's only one person that the shochet is thinking about, that the Kohen is thinking about in regards to Pesachim. So how do we know that that's the case? The pshat should be that the psul is only when it's partial and not when it's only everyone and not partial. Answers the Gemara, Kasav Zos, Kasav Rachmana Zos, Rachmana, the Torah writes the word Zos, Da'adi'ika kula orla lo pasla. Until there is a full until all of the participants that the shochet is thinking about, until all of them are arelim, so then lo pasla. But what do we see here in this drasha? Loshna b'shchita veloshna b'zrika. Here we see that there's no distinction between shchita and zrika. So if that's the case, that there's no distinction between shchita and zrika, then there should also be no possibility for a machlokes between Rav Chizda and Rabbah, because everyone has to agree. Everyone has to agree, like the last line of this page says, Loshna b'shchita v'loshna b'zrika. You can't make the distinctions of yesh machsheves b'zrika and ein machsheves b'zrika. It's the same din by shchita. shita as there is a zrika. So therefore, the Gemara entirely rejects the first approach that we learned together on Thursday night and pivots on the last line of Samach Aleph Amud Beis to another possibility. Says the Gemara, Elo Amar Ravashi. Ravashi says no. They're arguing about something totally different. Says the Gemara, bottom line, Rav Chizda v'Rabba, what are they arguing about? Samach Beis Amud Aleph. They're arguing about B'hai Kra K'miflagei. They're arguing about the following pasuk. The pasuk reads, V'nirtza lo lechaper alav. So the pasuk says that you do the ritzui, you're going to bring the hakrava for the sake of someone who needs a kapara lechaper alav. So what's the drasha? It says in the Gemara, second line, alav v'lo al chaveiro. It only applies to you and not on your friend. How do Rabba and Rav Chizda understand that? So it says the Gemara, Rabba savar chavero dumya didei. It has to be a friend who's similar to you. Mahu debar kapara, af chavero debar kapara. You and your friend, when you're on a level playing field, I can give you kapara if you're like me. However, it says la'afuke hay arel delav bar kaparu. But if I have in mind an Orel who's not like me, I can't give him kapara because he's not like me. And because this is a nuance, and because I can't give him kapara, so even if I think about him, he's not a bar kapara, so he's not a psul. So therefore, says the Gemara in the name of Rabbah, kosher. That's why in the Machlokes, in the top of Samach Aleph Amud Beis, when the whole case was presented, Rabbah was lenient because he's looking at this pasuk and he says, "Alav dumya didei," but this guy's not domet to me. An Orel is not domet to a Nemo. Totally not shaykh to Korban Pesach. And because he's not shaykh to Korban Pesach, says Rabbah, so therefore, even if the Kohen has in mind during the Zrika about this Orel, not relevant, doesn't make any difference at all. And that's why he says kosher. However, Rav Chizda Sof, 5 lines down, Hi Orel Nami, no, Kevan de Bar Chiyuvahu Bar Kaparahu, Alam de Shalain. This person is an Orel. Granted, he's a Yid, but he has an Orla. He's still a Bar Chiyuva. He's still obligated in Bris Milah. As a mole, the first bris I ever did on an adult was a 35-year-old man. Unbelievable story. His father was a self-hating Jew. He refused to get his kids circumcised. When the father died, the son, 35 years old, scheduled his Bris Milah. What a schus. What a tremendous chus. He did the mitzvah at 35. He's a bar chiyuva. So says Rav Chizda, I don't agree with you. If he's a bar chiyuva, then he's also a bar kapara. I know he has an orla. I got it. But the fact that he could have gotten a bris, that's enough. And here's the line. Hoil, and we're back to the concepts of hoil. Remember what hoil is. Hoil is a theoretical construct. Because you could have done X, we therefore assume you've done X. Hoil, says the Gemara, hol de ibai misake nafshe, since he could have gotten a bris. So therefore he should get kapara too. And because he's eligible to get kapara, so when you have in mind that the Orel should get kapara, but he still has a flaw that he's an Orel, so therefore it ruins the korban. It's no longer kosher, it's pasul. So that's the machlokes, Rabbah and Rav Chizda. Says the Gemara, hey, wait a second. Did you just say that Rav Chizda holds of hoil? He holds of the theoretical that even though he's an Orel right now, but because he could get a bris, therefore we assume he's a bar kapara. Really? Umi isle the Rav Chizda hoil. Is that true? We learned this sugya already. Remember the story about cooking from Yantif to Shabbos. We said that it's mutter to cook. Why? Because hoil that maybe guests will come. So it says the Gemara as follows: Umi isle the Rav Chizda hoil v'ha'itmar ha'ofem miyom tov l'chol. If a person's cooking from Yom Tov to the weekday. Let's say it's only one day. You live in Eretz Yisrael. You're cooking on Shavuos. You're cooking on the last day of Pesach, and you're cooking for the next day. So if you cook from Yom Tov to Chol, Rav Chizda Omar Loke, he says you get Malkos. Rabba Omar Eino Loke. Rabba says you're not allowed to do. You're going to get Malkos. So that's a big machlokas in the Amorai. What's the svara of each of them? And then we'll see where our conflict is. Rabba Omar Eino Loke Amrinan Hoel v'imi kloile orchim chazile. Since here's our key word hoel. Since we know that imi kloile orchim, that had guests shown up, that the food would have been fine for them. They may never show up, but hoel, since they could show up, so therefore the cooking that I do late in the afternoon on Yontif, the last day of Pesach, so hoel that maybe they'll come. So then hashtanami chazile velo lucky, and because of that, even though they didn't show up, but my cooking had a loophole in it. It had a hoil in it. So therefore, lo lucky. However, Rav Chizda Amar Loke, why does Rav Chizda say that if you're ofeh from Yom Tov to Chol that you get Malkos? So then says the Gemara, Loke, because Lo Mrin Hoel. But that's a contradiction because Rav Chizda just said 30 seconds ago that we do hold of Hoel. That's why the Orel is considered a Bar Kapara. But you can't hold of Hoel over there and not hold of Hoel over here. Pick one. You either hold of the principle of Hoel. You either allow for these types of loopholes in halacha or you don't. But you can't pick and choose. There has to be a consistency. So says the Gemara, don't worry. Everything is going to be okay. And here's how the Gemara is going to answer this. Actually, let me first finish out the question. Bishlama de Rabba adirabba. You're right. It's the same two Baalei Plugta. It's Rabba and Rav Chizda. So it's really a double question. Because Rabba, in our case, did not hold of Hoel, and Rav Chizda did. And in the case of Yontif, Rabba did hold of Hoel, and Rav Chizda did, opposite shitas. So Bishlama, I could explain away Rabba. Bishlama de Rabba ad Rabba lo kashya hacha mechusar ma'isa hasam de lo mechusar ma'isa. Here in our case, when we talk about the bris milah, so it's mechusar ma'isa. He's lacking something that needs to be done. In that case, he's like, it's mechusar ma'isa. You have an action to do and you didn't do it. There's no hoil. You can't use hoil when you need a bris. Go get a bris. And until you get a bris, we treat you like you don't have a bris. You're a total arel. You're not a bar kapara. However, says the Gemara, Hasam, over there by Yontif, de lo mechusar ma'isa. There, you're lo mechusar ma'isa, and there we do say hoil. You're not. There's not mechusar ma'isa. It's just a question of your mindset when you're cooking. So that's not called mechusar ma'isa. There's no bris to be done. You're cooking. There's no bris to be done. Everything's fine. But by the person who's an arel, there's a bris to be done, and therefore you cannot use hoil. Fine. However, kasha, it's difficult to understand the sheet of Rav Chizda. Why would Rav Chizda say hoil by the case of bris milah, but not say hoil in the case of hoil the iklai leorchin by Yom Tiv? So answers the Gemara, Amar Amre, they said ki lesle le Rav Chizda hoil lekula lechumra islay. When does Rav Chizda use the principle of hoil? That's only true. When does he not use hoil? That's only when it's lekula. However, lechumra, when it comes to astringency, he does. Good. So now we've answered our question. We asked the question at the top of Samach Aleph Amud Beis. What was the machlokes about in regards to the mindset of the shochet on Pesach, where he starts out with the mindset of being eligible for nimol, for someone who's circumcised. Masha'en came by the zrika he has in mind to get kapara for an orel. What's the machlokes about? In short, the Gemara answers on the top of Samach Beis Amud Aleph and Amud later that the machlokes is about how to understand the pasuk of Anir Telo Lechaper Alav and Chaveru Dum Yedidei, and how do we look at an orel? Do we say hoel about an orel? Do we not say a hoel about an orel? And that explains the machlokes. Now, yesterday, in our first approach, we looked at a lengthy, detailed brisa, and today we're going to ask a couple of questions in a row on that brisa, and then we'll learn one brief agadata, and then we will actually wrap up for the day, so not too much longer to go for tonight. Here we go. We're about a third of the way down on Samach Beis Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, Amar le Marzutra berei de Rab Mori le Ravina. So they say to Ravina as follows, I don't understand. Tani, we learned in a brisa yesterday, on Thursday actually, hoil ve'orla poseles. Since orla is a psul in the Korban Pesach in general, vituma poseles. And tuma, when there's an impurity, what's the impurity on? That's what the Gemara is going to speak about now. And tuma is also posel, so then we should assume the following. Ma tuma lo asaba mixas tuma kechol tuma. Just like, as we've said already, that if only a small number of people are considered pasul, we don't treat all of those people as pasul as it relates to Korban Pesach. Says the Gemara, af orla, the same is true in regards to orla, lo asa mixas orla kechol orla. We don't assume that if there's 5 arelim and there's 5 nimolim, we don't assume all of them are arelim. The arelim cannot eat the Korban Pesach and the nimolim can. So says the Gemara, when you compare orla to tuma, what type of tuma are you talking about? Asks the Gemara halfway down Samach Beis Amud Aleph. Hi tuma hechidami. What tuma are we talking about? Ilema betumas gavre. If we're talking about people, it's the people who are tamei. So then, Umay lo asaba mixas tuma kichol tuma. Then I don't understand what you mean when you say that some people are tamei and some people are not. Di'ika arba v'chamisha gavre tmein, the arba v'chamisha gavre tahorin. You got 4 guys who are perfectly tamei, 4 guys who are perfectly tahor. Excuse me. Lo pasle hu tmein tahorin. The guys who are tamei are not going to make the guys who are tahorin tamei. They can still, the guys who are tahorin can still eat, no problem at all. That's fine. But if that's true, then I don't need the whole comparison. Gabe orlanami, halo pasle. We don't assume that our reilim are going to make nimol and tamei. Ditnan lemulin vila reilim kosher. We said in the Mishnah earlier that if you have nimolin and if you have areilim, that they don't passel one another. So the Gemara's question is, why does the Brisa have to compare Orla to Tuma? Both cases are obvious. So says the Gemara, Maishna Tuma de Pshitale. Why is it that when it comes to Tuma, it's so obvious that if you have 5 Tame guys and 5 Tahor guys, that they don't ruin one another? What are you so confused about? It should be the same exact thing. The guys who are tamei are not going to be metame the tahorin, and the guys who are areilim are not going to poison the well with the guys who are nimolim. You're gonna make them into areilim? They're circumcised already. What is the suffix of the Gemara? So therefore, the Gemara says it can't be that when we're comparing Orla to Tuma and the Brisa that they're talking about Gavre, that they're talking about people. Ella, says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down. Ella betumas basar. The Brisa is comparing Orla to a case of basar that's tamei. How so? Says the Gemara as follows. Says the Gemara. Lost my spot. Sorry. Answers the Gemara. It says the Gemara like this. Ella betumas basar. We're talking about tumas basar. Umay lo asaba mixas tuma kechol tuma. What did the Brisa then mean when it said that that partial tuma is not like the whole tuma? So answers the Gemara. De'ilu itmi chad mi evarim. If only one limb of the korban pesach became tamei, so then hay de'itme sarfinan le, the one that became tamei, that one will get ruined and burned. That one you can't eat. And the other ones you can, the other ones that you'd be able to eat, no problem. So the Meforshim here are very bothered by this. The whole Korban Pesach is cooked on a spit, basically. It's all cooked in one unit. So what do you mean that only one part of it became tamei? How is that possible? The whole thing is connected. So some of the Meforshim explained that the reason why this isn't a problematic question is because we learned a couple of days ago that the Korban Pesach was cooked mekulas. They would take some of the innards, some of the chalavim, and wrap it around the head of the animal as it was on the spit. So it's possible that those chalavim would have become tamei, but the rest of the body would have been tahor. Under those cases, we would have burned the chaylev, that's sarfinan, but the rest of the animal was achlinan. But anyways, that's how the Gemara explains that when the Brisa compares Orla to Tuma, the Brisa wasn't talking about a case of tuma, of a gever, of a human being. That's pasha. That's obvious. We didn't have a suffix about orla in that regard. It was talking about tumas basar. Okay, fine. So then asks the Gemara 4/5 of the way down, about 15 lines up. All right, well, let's see if this stands up to the test of logic. Says the Gemara as follows. B'mayu kimta, what did we just say that this part of the Brisa was about? We said it was betumas basar. Well, if the Reisha is talking about that, then I don't understand the Seifa. Says the Gemara, Ema Seifa, done in davar she'enu noheg b'chol hazvachim, v'davar she'enu noheg b'chol hazvachim, v'al yochiach zman she'noheg b'chol hazvachim. We said in the Brisa at the end that the only things you can compare are things that are congruent, things that are on a level playing field. But if you have cases of things that are eino noeg b'chol hazvachim, so then you can only draw from other things that are eino noeg b'chol hazvachim. So we precluded zman from that time. But says the Gemara, umay tuma. I don't understand. Inema in the Seifa, what was the Seifa? We know what the Reisha is talking about. We said the Reisha can't be talking about Kavra. It has to be talking about Basar. But if the Seifa is talking about Basar, we have a problem. Inema Tumas Basar. If you say that the Seifa is talking about Tumas Basar, Amai Eno Noheg B'chol Hazvachim. What are you talking about? If an animal's tummy, of course that applies across the boards. It's not a din in Hilchos Pesach. Any korban that's tummy has this rule. Elapshita must be that the Seifa, the Reish is talking about Basar, but it must be that the Seifa is talking about Ella, says the Gemara, Elapshita b'tumas gavre. It must be talking about tumas gavre. And if that's the case, if the Seifa is talking about that, then how do we understand the Brisa? Umay eino noig b'chol hazvachim. What does it mean that it's not noig b'chol hazvachim? Answers the Gemara about tumas gavre in the following way: Di'il b'chol hazvachim Orel v'tamei mishalchin korbanos sehen. With most korbanos, if you have an orel and if you have a tamei, they can still be the bailam of a korban. However, the ilu bepesach orel v'tamei ein mishalchin pischehem. Oh, so the Gemara answers clear. The Reisha of the Brisa is talking about tumas basar, and the Seifa of the Brisa is talking about tumas gavre. So asks the Gemara, the question should pop off the page. And asks the Gemara, Reisha betumas basar, the Seifa betumas gavre. What are you talking about? The Reisha and Seifa, when it says tuma, without any qualifications, the Reisha's tuma means animal. The animal became tummy, and the Seifa is talking about people who became tummy. I mean, it's the same Brisa. Why would you say that? Answers the Gemara, Amar Le, yeah, what's the problem? There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely true. Shame tuma kaparach. It's just talking about different types of tuma. You're bothered by the fact that it's not qualified by tumas basar or tumas gabri. That's your problem. Yes, the Mishnah is talking about two different cases. Crazier things have happened. But then the Gemara posits another answer, 6-7 lines from the bottom. Or we could give another answer. Seifa, the Seifa nami betumas basar. It's also talking about tumas basar. But we asked earlier, but tumas basar doesn't apply when it's tumas basar applies, to all korbanos, not just by Pesachim. Oh, so then where do we find the uniqueness of tumas basar? Because it has to be unique to korban Pesach. Otherwise, it shouldn't be brought. It would apply across the boards, and that's something that's nohig across the boards. So then answers the Gemara, the last of the short lines, the ilu b'chol hazvachim. In regards to most korbanos, says the Gemara as follows: the ilu b'chol hazvachim, bein shenit machelev ubasar kayam. If the chaylev became tameh, but the flesh was totally fine, the animal itself was tahor, bein shenit ma basar, or if the flesh became tameh, the chaylev kayam, and the chaylev was still tahor, so then zorek es adam. If there's only one or the other, you're good. You can still be zorek es adam. The ilu bepesach, however, that's true by regular zvachim. But when it comes to korban pesach, there is a uniqueness by tumas basar. This is what we were missing before. We were missing this uniqueness of tumas basar. What is it? The ilu bepesach nit machelev ubasar kayam zorek. Make sure I'm in the right place here. Yep, the ilu bepesach nit machelev ubasar kayam zorek es adam. That if you have the chelev, which was tamei, and the basar, which was kaim, you do zrika. But nitma basar v'chelev kaim eino zorek es adam. By korban pesach, we're more strict. That if the korban pesach becomes tamei, that's problematic. Oh, so good. So now we have these two answers. Says the Gemara. Still, I have another question for you. B'mayu kimta, what is it that you were trying? B'mayu kimta is like the introduction to a question whenever you see it. Oh, you tried to say X, let's check that out. That's what b'mayu kimta typically means. So b'mayu kimta, how did you just explain the Brisa to say it was betumas basar? So if the Reisha is betumas basar, then I have another part of the Brisa that I don't understand as it relates to your understanding of the Reisha. Says the Gemara, Seifa, we have another part of the Brisa which says, "Dan and davar shelo hutar michlalo, midavar shelo hutar michlalo." You can only talk about things that have a similar level of heter. However, ve'al tochiach tuma shaharei hutra michlala. We see in this aspect of the Brisa that tuma has to be similar to the other things, but Tuma does have a heter because we know that Tuma is hutra b'tzibor. Tuma hutra b'tzibor is a din that when everyone is tameh, you can still, under certain specified circumstances, you can still benefit from a korban. Fine. So says the Gemara, b'mai. What was the case of Tuma in that case? And we're about to turn to the top of Samach Beis Mevei. Says the Gemara, Ilema. If you want to say that the Seifa is talking about the Tumas Basar, but then Heicha Hutra. Then where is the heter here? That doesn't make any sense. You can't say that it's betumas basar, because betumas basar, when the Gemara says that there's tuma hutra b'tzibor, that's not when the basar's tameh. That's when people are tameh. So we say tuma hutra b'tzibor. Okay, you're tameh. What can we do? Nebach, you're tameh. But it's never about the basar. That for sure doesn't make any sense. So therefore, this line, which says that you can't learn from tuma, must be talking about something else. It says the Gemara, "L'pshit betumas gavre, the heicha hutra michlala b'tzibor." So we have a case. We know the tuma hutra b'tzibor. So that's what this aspect of the Brisa must mean. It's talking about gavre. So it says the Gemara, the same question that I asked before. Samach beis and beis, 3 lines down. Reisha betumas basar, Seifa betumas gavre. So you mean to tell me that we asked this question before? I don't know why the Gemara is so bothered by it again, but it's the same question yet again. So you're saying the earlier parts of the brisa we're talking about tumas basar, and this thing about tuma hutra b'tzibur is only talking about tumas gavre. The seifa tumas gavre. So says the Gemara in shem tuma kaparach. We're talking about various forms of tuma. What are you so worked up about? Nothing wrong. Totally fine. Kula betumas basar. Really, everything is talking about tumas basar. But how can everything be talking about tumas basar? Because we just pointed out that the concept of tuma hutra b'tzibur doesn't apply to meat that's tameh. You can't eat meat that's tameh. It can only apply to people who are tameh, not meat that is tameh. So then says the Gemara, v'hecha hutra betuma betumas pesach. Where do we have a heter of a korban pesach that's tameh? Answers the Gemara, we taka do have a leniency of basar tmeya. Where is it? Pesach haba betuma, nechal betuma, shelo ba mitchilasu elulachila. If the korban pesach's tameh and the people are tameh, no problem. Oh, it's a crazy kula, but that does explain how it could be that this brisa is through and through speaking about tumas basar. Good. So the Gemara asks a side question, and then we'll get to a little bit of a related agarata. Says the Gemara 7 lines down or so on Samach Beis and Beis. Masi Rav Huna bereid Rav Yoshua HaPesach she'avra shnaso v'ushchato bismano l'shmo. If you have a korban pesach has to be under a year old. So if you shecht that, and let's see the parameters. It's avra shnaso v'shachto bismano. You shechted it on Yud Daled, but it's the animal's too old to be shechted, and it was done lishmo for the sake of the korban pesach. V'chein. And similarly, another case which is going to have the same machlokes on it, hashochet acherim l'shem pesach. You have a korban that was already dedicated for another purpose, but you decided to take that korban pesach, which was already dedicated for another purpose, and you chose to make it for a pesachim. So then, what's the case here? V'chein hashochet acherim l'shem pesach bizmano on Yud Daled. These two cases, Rabbi Eliezer posel, Rabbi Yoshua machshir. And in the second case, we're going to ask on this. Taima, what's the reason why they were problematic? Because, actually not the second case, on both cases, Bismano, because both of them were done on Yud Daled Nisan. However, makes the Gemara a diuk as follows. Hashalo Bismano kasher. Maybe if it was Shalo Bismano, maybe if it was on Yud Nisan, it would have been kasher. That's the Gemara's question, a diuk. Ve'amai, why should that be true? Name a hoelu Bismano posel, Shalo Bismano nami posel. We should say, well, if it's going to be pasal bismano, all the more so it should be pasal when it's shalo bismano. That's a kol shekin. So the diuk is a little weird. The diuk sounds like it's going backwards a little bit. You don't make a diuk that makes for a strange scenario. You can't say that if you did it on the right time and it was pasal, then on the wrong time it should be kosher. That's backwards thinking. So the Gemara is bothered by that. Name a ho'elu bismano posel, then shalo bismano nami posel. Says the Gemara, no, the diuk is actually correct, but it's correct not for logical reasons. It's correct because there's a pasuk. What's the pasuk? And why is it that we say that bismano it's not kosher and shalo bismano it is kosher? Because of the following pasuk: Amar Papa, Shani Hasam do Amar Kraba Martem Zevach Pesachu, Hu behav yaso. Lohu l'shum acherim, v'lo acherim l'shmo. This is the diuk, and it's a subtle nuance here. So the Gemara's diuk is as follows: Hu behavya, so as it should be, lohu l'shum acherim. It should not be when it's done for others. V'lo acherim l'shmo, and a korban that's made for others should not be done for a korban pesach. Bismano shehu posel l'shum acherim, acherim sulim l'shmo. When it's done bismano, when it's going to be pasol, so then if you take a korban that's not meant for Pesach, so then acherim psulim l'shmo, then it's going to cause a problem. It won't be a kosher korban Pesach. Shelo bismano shu kosher l'shum acherim. When it was shelo bismano, taka would be kosher, which was our Gemara's question. It should be kosher acherim, and for acherim for a non-korban Pesach korban acherim ksherim l'shmo. Very good. So the Gemara just answers, yes, the diuk is strange. It's correct. If something is not kosher bismano, it should all the more so not be kosher shalo bismano. But the Gemara answers, don't worry, we have a pasuk and a drasha to explain. Let's see a brief, actually, that's a little bit of a lengthy, I got it toward the end of the page, but it is interesting. Rav Simlai, Asa Lakamid Rav Yochanan. Yochanan was a very, very early Amora, and Rav Simlai went over to ask him a shaila. Amar Lei said to Rav Yochanan, Nisni li mar sefer yuchsin. As we know, we have been lacking sorely some Sfarim that we don't even know that we're missing. One of them is referred to as Sefer Yuchsin. Now, Sefer Yuchsin, there are multiple Sfarim that were referred to as Sefer Yuchsin. One of them had to do unrelated to this one, which was a book kind of like about our yichus of Klal Yisrael. This was a little different. This was specific to the Sefer Divrei Hayamim, as we will soon see. So he wanted to learn. It's kind of like a special limud. It wasn't taught in yeshiva, and apparently it was only taught every 7 years. It was only taught to certain talmidim. It was a whole specific system. Anyways, says the Gemara, Rav Simlai said to Rav Yochanan, please teach me Sefer Yochsin. Omar le, Rav Yochanan said to Rav Simlai, Mehechan at, where are you from? Omar le, Milud, I'm from the city of Lud. Okay, that's where you were born. Behechan Mosavach. And where's your Mosavach? Taf and Shin in Aramaic are interchangeable. Where's your Moshav? Where do you live? What city do you live in? Where are you from? He says, I live right now in Naharda. Amar Le, Rav Yochanan says back to Rav Simlai, sorry, Eini Donin, we do not teach the book of Sefer Yuchsin, Lo Leludim v'lo Nahardain. I don't teach the people who are from Lud, and I don't teach the people who are from Naharda. The kol shekain ta'admi Lud Mosavach ben Naharda. And you especially, you were born in Lud and you now live in Naharda. You have a double knock against you. No chance. Not teaching you this. So Kafi v'artze, he really, Rav Simlai really pushed him. Kafi, he tried to force him. V'artze, and he begged him. Amar le, Rav Yochanan said, Rav Simlai said, Amar le, nisnio begimel yarche. Just teach it to me in 3 months. I'm not going to be overly matriachi. Check out this response. Shokal kala pasak be, and he let out this boisterous laugh, a mocking laugh. What happened? Omar le, Rav Yochanan says back to Rav Simlai, Uma Bruria famously, Debisu de Rav Meir, who was the wife of Rav Meir, Birase, the daughter of Rav Yochanan ben Traju. This woman was a stellar, educated woman. And what happened here? By her, the Tanya, the Brisa writes, Tlas Meya Shmaitasa, she learned 300 statements biyoma in a day, migimel meya rabivasa, from 300 different rabbis, v'afilu hachi, and even with all of that learning, 300 statements a day. How long did it take her to learn? V'afilu hachi lo yatzasay dechavasa betlas shinin. Forget, you're asking in 3 months. She didn't finish it in 3 years. That's 300 a day. That's 1,000 approximately a year. You're talking about 3,000 ikarim, 3,000 yisodos from Sefer Yuchsin. You want to learn it in 3 months? You're speeding up the process by 12-fold. That's crazy. There's no way you're going to get that done. That's not happening. So basically, Rav Simlai understood at that point that he wasn't getting what he wanted. So then he just said, fine, let me just ask the Rav, the Shaila before I leave. Yishakil va'azel, when he was about to turn and leave, Omar Le, he said to Rav Yochanan, Rebbe, ma bein lishmo v'shalo lishmo, and between la'ochlav and shalo la'ochlav. We've already learned a number of times in Mishnayos and in Brisas, we've learned the distinction between that which is lishmo, which we've been defining as for the sake of the Korban Pesach, versus shalo lishmo, which we've been defining as for the sake of a Korban Shlamim. And also, we said he wants to know, Rav Simlai wants to know from Rav Yochanan between la'ochlav and shalo la'ochlav. So Amar Le, Rav Yochanan says there's a whole bunch of distinctions. Amar Le, before we get to that, he gives him a little compliment. Because you are a tzur b'mei rabbanon, because you are a Talmud Chacham, tav e'imalach, I'll give you an answer. You got to be of a certain stature to get an answer. So he says, lishmo v'shalo lishmo. When it comes to lishmo and shalo lishmo, that's psula begufo. When someone brings a korban lishmo or shalo lishmo, they do whichever one is wrong, and it's not always clear which one it is. It's not always shalo lishmo is wrong. But when you do make that error, it's psul begufo. However, la'ochla v'shalo la'ochla, but when your kavanah is who's going to eat the korban pesach, that's not a psul begufo. Ein psul begufo. Lishmo v'shalo lishmo, another distinction. When it comes to your mindset of Pesachim versus Shlamim, yafshar levarer isuro. We can't tell. We have no way of telling. But la'ochla v'shalo la'ochla efshar levarer isuro. We can find out what happened. Just ask who's shaykh to eat the food. We can find out. Lishmo v'shalo lishmo. When it comes to the mindset of Pesachim versus Shlamim, yeshno b'dalet avodos. That applies to all 4 steps of the hakrava process of shchita, of kabbalah, of hiluch, and of zrika. However, la'ochla v'shalo la'ochla, when it comes to the mindset of those who are eligible to eat from the Korban Pesach, eino ba'arba avodos, that doesn't apply. Another distinction, lishmo v'shelo lishmo yeshno b'tzibur kibiyachid. When it comes to the mindset of Pesachim and Shlamim, this can also have an impact on a tzibur korban as well as a yachid korban. However, la'ochlav v'shelo la'ochlav, when it comes to the mindset of who's eligible to eat from the Pesachim, einu b'tzibur kibiyachid. No, it's not correct. There we don't say such a distinction that it would apply like a tzibur, with a korban tzibur, like it would with the yachid. So Rav Ashi just pushes back a little bit on this. He says it's not really. You gave me 4 distinctions. It's not really 4. Rav Ashi Omar, psulo begufo v'efshar levar isur chad milsehi. Those are the same things. When you say that there's a psul beguf, that there's something flawed in the character of the korban, that's the same thing as efshar levar isura. How so? Because he says as follows, 7 lines from the bottom, maybe a little bit more, 9 lines from the bottom. What's the reason why there was a psul beguf? By Pesachim and Shlamim, we don't know. We have no way of telling. So why did you say it's a psul beguf, says the Gemara? Mishum di efshar levar isuro. So really there were 3 distinctions. So to summarize this part, and then we'll wrap up for the night, this is the mindset that Rav Simloi was asking. Rav Simloi wanted to know from Rav Yochanan, what are the major distinctions between the worlds of Pesachim versus Shlamim versus Ochlav and Shelo Ochlav? Lishmo and Shelo Lishmo on one side, and the other side would be Ochlav and Shelo Ochlav. He answered with 4 answers. Rav Ashi says it's not really 4 answers. Your answer of Psula Begufo and Efshar Levar Risuro are the same exact thing. So we're going to stop here. We'll pick up Emir Hashem tomorrow night. Emir Hashem, if my flight's on time and lands on time, in person at 8:40 p.m. Chicago time, both live and on Zoom, and then posted afterwards, Emir Hashem, to the appropriate online resources. I hope you all have a beautiful night. And again, Yiratzon, that the neshama of my grandfather Avram ben Yitzchak should have an aliyah. Wishing you all a beautiful, beautiful night.